A Quiet Place Day 1, the brand new spin-off prequel to A Quiet Place. In this video we will be diving into its deeper themes and symbolism and how it relates to the other two installments. It's a journey that will take us to some terrifying places, but on the far side of all that, there's something else. The DNA of this franchise is very simple. Sound brings death. The new movie opens with a shot of the New York City skyline. Some ominous text appears on screen, revealing that New York City gives off an average of 90 decibels, the volume of a typical scream. Human activity makes sound. The city is thrumming with life, and something is coming to snuff it out. We meet our protagonist, Sam, in a hospice. She's terminally ill with cancer, and she's accompanied by her constant companion, a cat called Frodo. Sam and Frodo. Where have we heard that before?
Oh, Sam.
And yes, Sam and Frodo are indeed on a journey into the heart of terror, and we're coming with them. From now on, there will be spoilers. The creatures of this franchise have come to be known as Death Angels, after a newspaper headline that appears on the wall in the first film. So that's what I'll call them throughout this video. And it's a fascinating name, because they are these creatures which have fallen from the heavens, encased in meteorites. We learn very little about their origins across all three films, but John Krasinski has said this. The idea is if they grew up on a planet that had no humans and no light, then they don't need eyes. They can only hunt by sound. They also develop a way to protect themselves from everything else, so that's why they're bulletproof. Ironically, the sensitive hearing which makes them such effective killers is also their weakness, as we shall see. But suffice it to say, in order to hear properly, they have to open the armoured plates on their heads, exposing their delicate inner ear architecture. They often hunt in groups, communicating through clicking sounds, which also provides a form of echolocation. They seek and destroy any life that makes a sound. And here's what I find disturbing about them. They have these sharp, carnivorous teeth, but they don't eat their prey. We see them hunt and kill hundreds of human beings, but that's all they do. They extinguish the sound. They don't even eat the victims. So why are they doing this? We don't know. Perhaps they are unable to digest human flesh, and yet they continue to hunt just out of sheer instinct. Perhaps they can survive years without food. Perhaps they kill for sport. I like the mystery. It gives these creatures a more spiritual dimension. They happen to land on this iconic city, this hive of human activity, and they are here to extinguish life. It's unfathomably simple. A Quiet Place Day 1 does give us a bit more information, for better or worse. For the first time, we see them eating something. There's this strange growing network of sac-like food sources which appear to have come with them from their home planet. And when one of the Death Angels detects spores, I think that's what they are, emerging from a particular sac, it signals to the others, and three of them start chomping down on it. So they're farming their own mushrooms. That's basically what's going on. A key theme in this film is performance itself. In the first act, Sam and Frodo attend a puppet show. It's a mesmerising piece of physical theatre. The puppeteer animates a young boy. We watch as he inflates a balloon and is lifted off the ground by the balloon until it pops. And at that point, Sam walks out of the theatre. Something about it is too much, and she just wants some pizza. But then, all hell breaks loose, and Sam is forced to hunker down inside the theatre. There's something eerie about seeing all these people crammed into the auditorium, trying not to make a sound. Because the theatre is already one of the places we go to be silent. But here it takes on a more horrifying significance. This human audience is now under the scrutiny of an alien audience, and the slightest sound will be the death of them. Eventually, with the help of Frodo and another survivor called Eric, Sam gets her pizza in a Harlem jazz club where her dad used to play piano, and in a moment reminiscent of the puppet show in the first act, Sam and Eric do a playful, silent performance of their own on the stage of the jazz club, a magic show, in which Eric demonstrates what is probably the only card trick he knows. The two of them take a bow to the empty room as they drink swigs of alcohol. It's a beautifully observed but depressing vision. It's eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. What is life but a fleeting moment on the stage of the world, under the spotlight of the sun? Now, A Quiet Place Day One does give us more than that, as we shall see. But for all this to come together, for us to fully appreciate the richness of this franchise, we'll need to head back to the first two instalments, beginning with A Quiet Place in 2018. Is it worth bringing life into a broken world, even if it costs you everything? A Quiet Place answers with an emphatic yes. We meet the Abbott family on day 89, 3 months after the Death Angels first arrived. And this family of 5 is learning how to adapt to this dystopian setting. I think the power of this first film lies in its use of symbolism. What do I mean by a symbol? A symbol is a fact, a tangible object that embodies higher meaning. In other words, the material world around us and in our stories isn't merely material. Each part represents some kind of higher meaning, and the parts come together to convey meaning at different scales, from the scale of an individual to the scale of a nation. And A Quiet Place is sympathetic to this language. Objects enter the story in one way, with one source of meaning, and are later transformed into something greater. Let me show you what I mean. At the start of the movie, the youngest son, Bo, draws a rocket on the floor of the shop. But then it is the noise of a toy rocket, the space shuttle, which tragically brings death to the young Bo. And then later on, it is the firework rockets which enable Evelyn to give birth to a baby boy. The noise of the explosions lures the Death Angels away as Evelyn cries out in labour in the bathtub. So the rocket begins as a naive dream of escape. Then it becomes a symbol of death and loss, even guilt. But finally, it is transformed into a symbol of life and new birth through intense struggle. Here's another one. The scream. An anguished release of sound which is surely nothing but bad news in the Quiet Place universe. And that's what happens at first. A fellow survivor, the old man in the woods, loses his wife. His face is contorted with agony. He's about to scream. Lee pleads with him, "Please, whatever you do, don't scream." But what happens? It's understandable, but we see the bitterness at play. This man has had enough of this cruel world. He wants the creatures to take his life, and he doesn't care if Lee and Marcus are collateral damage. But later in the film, we see a very different kind of scream. Lee himself crying out in self-sacrifice, laying down his life to draw a Death Angel away from his children. And then there's the hearing aid. Lee is trying to get it working for Regan, his deaf daughter, to help keep her safe. But whatever he tries, it just doesn't work. But later we discovered that this hearing aid is in fact the key to Regan's protection, and far more, it's the weakness of the Death Angels. So it works, but not in the way that Lee was expecting. He doesn't live to see the fruits of his efforts. And now we arrive at perhaps the most important symbol in the entire franchise, water. On a broad scale, water represents the chaos of the Death Angels. It is this murky, confusing, overturning force. Now, we don't see the ocean in the first film, but check out this quote in the corner of Evelyn's calendar. At the beach, life is different. Time doesn't move hour to hour, but mood to moment. We live by the currents, plan by the tides, and follow the sun. In ancient cosmology, space and time were seen as these two conflicting forces. When space dominates, things are familiar, ordered, and stable. For example, a people group living at peace in their promised land. When time dominates, things are unstable, confused and restless, handed over to cyclical, overturning forces. This might be reflected by a flood or a people group wandering in the wilderness or being carried off into exile. So the setting of these movies reflects a dominance of time. Any surviving humans are wanderers in what is rapidly becoming a wilderness. The buildings are crumbling, and the world is being returned to a more primordial state. Let's return to that quote from the calendar. Life on the beach is fragile and can be swept away in an instant. And that expresses the chaotic setting of these movies. There are some things you can learn and predict about the death angels, just as there are some things you can learn and predict about the ocean. There are tides and currents. But overall, the death angels are a surging, unstoppable force tearing down civilization. This is the context, the chaos of the ocean. And yet, water also brings life. The Abbott family are living on fish sourced from a local river. The sound of the rushing waters even provides localized protection from the death angels. So water is dangerous, and yet the path to safety seems to be through it. We see that most potently in the scene under the floor. The waters from broken pipes are flooding into the space. There's a death angel on the hunt. It's chaos, total chaos. Evelyn sees her newborn baby boy floating inside a wooden box. She picks him up and shields him behind the falling water. This is reminiscent of the story of Moses in the Bible. We read in Exodus 1 and 2 of a profoundly hostile environment. Pharaoh gives the order for every newborn Hebrew boy to be drowned in the river Nile. But we read of one mother who places her baby boy in a basket and floats him among the reeds. Later, Pharaoh's daughter arrives and draws him out of the water, and he is given the name Moses, which means draw out. That's the essence of the Exodus story, down and then up. This aquatic symbolism is developed even further in A Quiet Place Part 2. The song Beyond the Sea plays ominously over the radio. It comes to represent the hope that across the ocean there is a safe refuge. We encounter a man who has given up hope. Emmett, an old friend of the Abbott family, who has lost his own wife and children to the death angels. Here, the symbolism of fire is prominent. In the first film, Lee put flaming beacons on top of the corn silos, signalling their presence to other survivors. And we learn that Emmett even saw those beacons. He knew deep down that it was Lee.
Did you know it was him?
Yes.
And did you ever think to come for us?
No.
Instead, he resides in this dilapidated steel foundry where the fires no longer burn. Emmett is a man who has given up hope. But then he sees this miraculous newborn baby, and it does something to him. It causes him to lower his mask. In the midst of global catastrophe, here is this new, fragile life. But there's still a way to go, because Emmett has seen something else, something terrifying. Not just the death angels, but humans, other survivors, and what has become of them.
The people that are left, what they've become. You don't know, do you? Well, I do. They're not the kind of people worth saving.
In the Abbott family, we have seen growth through adversity, but other survivors have descended into cannibalism. And as Mathieu Pajot writes in his book, The Language of Creation, cannibalism is a sign of returning to the dominion of time, which is a self-negating and self-swallowing pattern of manifestation. It is a shocking image of vanity, narcissism, absurdity, counterproductiveness, and pointlessness. Post-apocalyptic films often explore this idea. In a global catastrophe, we see what humans are really like. In some people it brings out the best, in others it brings out the absolute worst. And we can't blame it all on the death angels. No, what this situation is doing is amplifying tendencies that are already present in the human heart. Emmett has experienced this firsthand, and it has eroded his hope that humanity has a future. But over the course of the film, Regan ignites in him a spark of hope. And it comes from that same self-sacrificial love demonstrated and passed on by her father.
And you were right. I'm nothing like him. You are.
Remember how the first film ends with a miraculous discovery, that the death angels hunt through sound, but the right sound will cause them to writhe in pain, opening up their plates of armour, making them vulnerable to a bullet or an improvised weapon. A Quiet Place Part 2 ends with Regan broadcasting that message, making it go global, and the sound of deliverance is carried far and wide by the radio waves. At last, there is hope. With this symbolic framework in place, let's return to A Quiet Place Day 1. Notice again the prominence of water. We see children shielded behind the tumbling water of a fountain. We first meet Eric, bursting from the waters of a flooded subway entrance. And later, the trio find themselves whisked along a flooded subway tunnel and up into a church. The religious, baptismal imagery doesn't get more overt than that. And towards the end, Sam risks her life so that Eric can escape with Frodo. They make it onto the boat, into the care of Henri, the character who is the link between this spin-off prequel and the other films. Eric discovers a letter from Sam entrusting Frodo to his care and thanking him for showing her how to value life once again. My name's Thomas Thorogood. I get into the deeper meaning of movies. Do subscribe if you'd like to stay in the loop. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, it's deeper than you think.